My son laughed when I rented for many years, but now I bought a villa myself. He came uninvited and said, "It's perfect. My wife will love living here." He began to brazenly threaten me that he would take the villa away from me, as if I was too old for it. I just smiled, because I knew that in a few days he would be asking for my forgiveness. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. I was reviewing my property tax documents when Chris walked through my front door without knocking. My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips as I watched my son survey my living room like a real estate appraiser. "It's perfect," he said, running his hand along my new granite countertop. "Chloe would absolutely love living here." The document slipped from my fingers. "What are you talking about?" Chris wandered toward the bay windows overlooking Monterey Bay, his reflection ghosting across the glass. "This place has everything we need. 3 bedrooms, ocean view, that master suite upstairs." He turned back to me with a casual smile. "Much better than our cramped apartment." "Son, I bought this house for myself." The words came out slowly, like I was explaining something obvious to a child. "After 30 years of renting, I finally—" "Come on, Dad." His laugh cut through my sentence. "An old man like you doesn't need all this space. What are you going to do, throw dinner parties?" The casual cruelty in his voice made my chest tighten. I set down my mug with deliberate care. "I've been planning this for years, saving every—" "Look, here's the situation." Chris settled into my leather armchair like he owned it. "Chloe's pregnant. We need proper space, not some studio across town. You're 62 and living alone in a villa designed for families." My throat went dry. "You can't be serious." "I've already spoken with a lawyer about incompetency proceedings." His tone was conversational, discussing the weather. "Elderly people make poor financial decisions all the time. Spending your entire savings on an oversized house when you should be planning for assisted living." The words hit like physical blows. This was my son, the boy I'd raised alone after his mother left, the man I'd supported through college, graduate school, 3 failed businesses, 2 divorces, countless emergencies that drained my accounts month after month. "A nursing home would be much more sensible," Chris continued, examining his fingernails. "Proper medical care, social activities with people your age. I've researched some excellent facilities." I stared at him, this stranger wearing my son's face. "You're talking about stealing my home." "I'm talking about family responsibility." He stood up, straightening his expensive jacket that I'd probably paid for. "The legal process takes time, but judges understand when children need to protect elderly parents from themselves." The afternoon light streaming through my windows suddenly felt cold. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built, reduced to an obstacle in his path. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped the armrests of my chair. "Think about it, Dad." Chris moved toward the door with confident steps. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way, but Chloe and I are moving in either way." He paused at the threshold, looking back with something that might have been pity. "I'll give you a week to come to terms with reality." The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving me alone in the silence of my beautiful, threatened home. Minutes passed before I could move from my chair. The weight of Chris's words pressed down like a physical burden, and I found myself staring at the family photo on my side table. Sarah smiled back at me, frozen in time 30 years ago, holding baby Chris in her arms. That photograph triggered something deeper than grief. It unlocked 3 decades of choices I'd made, sacrifices I'd embraced without question, believing I was being a good father. After Sarah died, Chris became my entire world. Every decision revolved around his needs, his future, his happiness. I remember selling my car to pay for his college application fees, walking to work for 6 months while he drove my old pickup truck to his part-time job. $18,000 for his undergraduate degree. I ate canned beans and rice while he enjoyed campus dining halls. $22,000 more for graduate school and business administration. I postponed dental work, ignored my doctor's recommendations for surgery, anything to keep the tuition payments flowing. His wedding to Rebecca cost me everything I'd saved for my own retirement. $15,000 for a reception at the Monterey Bay Country Club. Chris insisted on champagne service and a 10-piece orchestra. I watched from the back table, wearing my one good suit, while he danced with his bride under crystal chandeliers I'd paid for. That marriage lasted 18 months. When Rebecca left, Chris moved back home, bringing debt I didn't know existed. Credit cards, personal loans, investments gone wrong, another $12,000 to clear his obligations, money I borrowed against my pension. The pattern continued with Chloe. Another elaborate wedding, another expensive honeymoon, another down payment on a house he couldn't afford. Every conversation began the same way. "Dad, I need," and ended with my bank account lighter. Never once did he say thank you. Not when I covered his mortgage payments during his business transition. Not when I paid for Chloe's expensive medical treatments. Not when I gave him the seed money for 3 different ventures that collapsed within months. I'd convinced myself this was love, this endless giving. But sitting in my villa, surrounded by the first beautiful things I'd ever owned, I understood the truth. Chris had never seen me as a father, just an available resource. Standing up slowly, I walked to my window overlooking the bay. The afternoon sun painted everything golden, but inside me, something cold and sharp was taking shape. An hour later, I needed clarity that only came from organized thinking. My home office had always been my sanctuary for problem solving, and tonight I required every analytical skill 30 years of engineering had taught me. Spreading documents across my mahogany desk, I began assembling the puzzle of Chris's financial reality. As his former guarantor and co-signer, I possessed more information than he probably remembered. Bank statements from accounts I'd backed, credit reports from loans I'd guaranteed, mortgage papers bearing my signature alongside his. The numbers told a devastating story. Chris earned $42,000 annually from his consulting work when he worked. His monthly expenses exceeded $6,800. Mortgage, car payments, credit cards, lifestyle costs that required my monthly transfers to bridge the gap. Without my $1,500 monthly contribution, his financial house of cards would collapse within 60 days. I opened my laptop and researched California competency laws. The burden of proof rested entirely on the petitioner. Chris would need medical evidence, witness testimony, and documentation of impaired judgment. My recent home purchase actually demonstrated sound financial planning, not incompetence. More importantly, I discovered something Chris hadn't considered. Any competency hearing would require full financial disclosure from both parties. Every dollar I'd given him, every debt I'd guaranteed, every monthly transfer would become public record. Did Chloe know her husband earned less than $50,000 while living like he made twice that amount? Did she understand their mortgage payments depended on a man Chris was trying to institutionalize? My engineering mind assembled the strategic framework methodically. Chris had handed me 3 powerful weapons: his financial dependency, his wife's ignorance, and the legal scrutiny he'd invited. I pulled up my online banking and reviewed the automatic transfers I'd been sending for years. $1,500 monthly to his checking account, labeled family support. Another $800 quarterly for their mortgage shortfall. Emergency payments averaging $1,200 annually for unexpected expenses. $36,000 yearly flowing from my accounts to his lifestyle. Tomorrow, those transfers would stop. I reached for my phone to call the bank's automated system, then paused. This required human conversation to ensure proper documentation. My finger hovered over the contact number as I calculated the timeline. Chris had given me 1 week to come to terms with reality. Instead, I would give him 48 hours to discover his new reality, the reality where his threats had consequences. The next morning, I dressed in my Navy business suit and drove to First National's downtown branch. Professional appearance mattered for financial transactions of this magnitude, and I intended to handle everything face-to-face. "Mr. Stewart, good morning." Sandra Martinez, the branch manager, had processed my mortgage applications and knew my account history. "How can I help you today?" I spread the documents across her desk methodically. "I need to terminate all automatic transfers to my son's accounts, remove myself as guarantor on his loans, and close our joint checking account." Sandra's expression shifted to concern. "That's quite comprehensive. Are you certain about these changes?" "Completely certain." My voice carried the calm authority of 30 years making engineering decisions. "I also need written confirmation that these actions take effect immediately." The paperwork took 90 minutes. Each signature felt like closing a door that had remained open far too long. Sandra processed the guarantor removal requests, explaining they would update Chris's credit profile within 48 hours. From the bank, I drove directly to Harold Chen's law office. Harold had handled my real estate purchase and understood California property law thoroughly. "Larry, what brings you here?" Harold gestured toward the leather chair facing his mahogany desk. "My son is threatening incompetency proceedings to claim my house. I need to understand my legal position." Harold leaned forward with interest. "Tell me exactly what he said." After explaining Chris's visit and threats, Harold shook his head slowly. Incompetency claims require substantial medical evidence and witness testimony. A recent property purchase actually demonstrates sound judgment, not impairment. What should I expect? Any competency hearing requires full financial disclosure from both parties. Your son's dependence on your support would become public record, along with every dollar you've provided over the years. The next 3 days passed quietly. I maintained my normal routine while monitoring my accounts online. The automatic transfers showed as canceled. Chris's joint account access had been revoked. Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. "Dad, something's wrong with my credit application." Chris's voice carried confusion, not yet anger. "The car dealership says there's an issue with my guarantor status." I settled into my armchair, cradling the phone comfortably. "What kind of issue?" "They're saying you're not listed as my guarantor anymore. That makes no sense." His tone sharpened with growing realization. "Dad, what did you do?" "I protected my financial interests exactly as you suggested I should." Silence stretched between us before Chris exploded. "You sabotaged my credit. This is insane. Chloe's pregnant. We need a reliable car." "You're 35 years old, Chris. Financial independence should have happened decades ago." "Fix this immediately." His voice cracked with panic. "I have obligations, payments due, responsibilities." "Yes, you do have responsibilities. They're entirely yours now." The line went dead as Chris hung up, leaving me in peaceful silence once again. 2 days later, Harold called with an update that didn't surprise me. Chris has retained David Walsh from Peterson and Associates. They're pushing for an expedited competency evaluation. "How expedited?" I asked, settling into my office chair, where strategic documents lay organized across my desk. "Tomorrow afternoon, they've arranged for Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, a well-regarded psychiatrist, to conduct the assessment at your home." I smiled slightly. "Perfect. I've been expecting this." Harold's voice carried curiosity. "You sound remarkably calm for someone facing a competency challenge." "Because I'm prepared. Can you be here when they arrive?" "Absolutely. This should be interesting." The next afternoon, Chris arrived precisely at 2 o'clock with his legal team. Dr. Morrison appeared professional and slightly uncomfortable, while David Walsh maintained the confident demeanor of a lawyer convinced his case was solid. "Dr. Morrison will be conducting a standard mental status examination," Walsh announced, spreading papers across my coffee table. "We appreciate your cooperation in this matter." "Of course." I gestured toward the seating area. "Please, make yourselves comfortable." Dr. Morrison opened her evaluation folder methodically. "Mr. Stewart, can you tell me today's date and our current location?" "March 15th, 2025. We're in the main living room of my home at 847 Cypress Point Drive, Monterey, California." She made notes while continuing. "I understand you recently made a significant property purchase. Can you explain your reasoning behind this decision?" I had anticipated this question for days. After 30 years of renting apartments while supporting my son's various financial needs, I finally prioritized my own housing security. I researched the market for 8 months, analyzed comparable properties, and purchased this villa using funds I'd accumulated specifically for this purpose. Chris shifted uncomfortably as Dr. Morrison documented my response. "How do you currently manage your daily finances?" "I maintain detailed records of all expenses, handle my own banking, and recently made strategic decisions about voluntary financial support I'd been providing to family members." I glanced meaningfully at Chris. Those decisions required careful analysis of both my capabilities and their long-term implications. Harold leaned forward slightly, producing a folder I'd prepared. "Doctor, Mr. Stewart underwent comprehensive medical and cognitive evaluations just last week. Perhaps these might be relevant to your assessment." Dr. Morrison reviewed the documents with obvious surprise. Clear cognitive function tests, clean medical reports, psychological evaluations showing excellent mental acuity for his age. Walsh's confident expression began showing cracks. These tests weren't court-ordered. No, Harold replied smoothly. They were proactive measures by a man concerned about frivolous legal challenges to his mental competency. Chris's face darkened as the afternoon's momentum shifted completely against his expectations. After everyone left, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. Chris's desperation felt too intense for simple financial pressure. Something deeper was driving his panic, and my engineering instincts demanded complete data before planning the next phase. I retrieved my filing cabinet keys and spread 30 years of financial documents across my office desk. As Chris's former guarantor, I'd kept meticulous records of every loan, credit application, and financial obligation I'd backed. The pattern emerged immediately. Chris's credit inquiries had accelerated dramatically over the past 18 months. Multiple payday loan applications, 3 separate home equity lines of credit, and a series of personal loans that painted a disturbing picture. His bank statements revealed the truth. Large cash advances from credit cards, followed immediately by electronic transfers to online entertainment platforms. The amounts were staggering, $22,000 in the last 6 months alone, all flowing toward what appeared to be gaming websites. I pulled out my calculator and began adding figures. The total debt exposure made my stomach clench. Chris owed $147,000 across 17 different credit sources. His annual income couldn't support even the minimum payments. More disturbing was the timeline. Every major request for my financial help coincided perfectly with large losses. The emergency car repair last October matched a $15,000 cash advance to cover gambling debts. His investment opportunity in December had actually funded another binge that lasted 3 weeks. Chloe clearly knew nothing. All statements were redirected to Chris's work address. Credit accounts existed solely in his name. Even their joint checking account showed no evidence of his problems. He'd been using my monthly transfers to maintain the illusion of stability while secretly bleeding money elsewhere. The mortgage documents revealed the most shocking detail. Chris had taken a second mortgage on their home last year, borrowing against equity to fund his activities. Their house, where Chloe planned to raise their baby, was now leveraged to the maximum. I sat back in my chair, processing the magnitude of his deception. Every dollar I'd provided, every sacrifice I'd made, had been diverted to feed an addiction that threatened to destroy his family. Chloe was completely innocent, carrying his child while he systematically destroyed their financial future. My phone rang, interrupting my analysis. Chris's name appeared on the display, and I realized he probably assumed today's failure meant I would be more reasonable about his demands. Instead, I now possessed information that could demolish his marriage, his reputation, and any remaining leverage he thought he held over me. 3 days later, the financial pressure began showing results. My phone rang consistently with verification calls from Chris's creditors, each confirming my guarantor withdrawal with professional efficiency. Mr. Stewart, this is Jennifer from Pacific Mortgage Services. We need to verify the removal of your guarantor status on account ending in 4847. Confirmed, I replied calmly, making notes in my ledger. I withdrew my guarantee on March 17th, as documented in your files. Each call followed the same pattern. Credit card companies, personal loan providers, home equity lenders, all systematically updating their records and adjusting Chris's account terms. His credit limits were dropping, payment schedules accelerating, and new application approvals becoming impossible. The mortgage company's call was particularly enlightening. Sir, this account modification triggers immediate review of loan terms. The primary borrower will need to qualify independently or find alternative guarantee arrangements within 30 days. Chris called me that evening, his voice tight with controlled panic. The mortgage company is demanding immediate requalification. They want proof of income, asset verification, the whole process. That seems reasonable for someone requesting to modify their loan terms. You know I can't qualify a loan. His composure cracked slightly. My income doesn't support the payments without your backing. Then perhaps you should have considered that before threatening to steal my home. I heard Chloe's voice in the background, sharp with concern. Chris, who are you arguing with? What's happening with the mortgage? Nobody, honey. Just banking issues. I'll handle it. The second call came 2 days later. Chris sounded desperate now, all pretense of confidence abandoned. Dad, the credit card companies are demanding immediate payment reductions. They've cut my limits to practically nothing. Financial institutions tend to be conservative when loan risk increases. You're destroying my family's security. His voice cracked with genuine panic. Chloe's asking questions I can't answer. She doesn't understand why our credit applications are being denied. Background noise suggested household tension. Chloe's voice carried clearly. Chris, tell me what's really going on. Why are we suddenly having financial problems? Give me a minute, okay? I'm handling this. But clearly he wasn't handling anything. The financial house of cards I'd unknowingly supported for years was collapsing exactly as planned, and Chris was trapped beneath the wreckage of his own deception. His third call, yesterday, bordered on hysteria. Everything's falling apart. The home equity line is frozen. Our car loan application was rejected. Chloe found rejection letters in the mail. Perhaps it's time for honesty with your wife. You don't understand. She'll leave me if she discovers the truth. The truth has a way of emerging regardless of our preferences. The line went quiet except for muffled arguing in the background. When Chris returned, his voice was barely controlled. If you don't fix this, I'll tell everyone what kind of father abandons his pregnant daughter-in-law. I smiled, hanging up as his desperation reached its peak. The following morning, I assembled every document that revealed Chris's hidden financial life. Bank statements showing systematic gambling transactions, credit card bills with cash advances to gaming platforms, loan applications Chloe had never seen. 3 years of evidence that painted a devastating picture of deception. I organized everything chronologically, highlighting key transactions and totals. The pattern was undeniable. Every dollar I'd provided had been diverted to cover gambling losses, while Chris maintained an elaborate fiction of financial stability for his pregnant wife. At the copy shop downtown, I made pristine duplicates of each document. The teenager behind the counter processed my order without interest, unaware he was facilitating the destruction of a marriage built on lies. Back home, I typed a brief cover letter on plain paper. Mrs. Stewart, you deserve to know the truth about your family's financial situation. These documents speak for themselves. Your husband can verify their authenticity. I sealed everything in a manila envelope addressed to Chloe's office address, information I'd gathered from Chris's emergency contact forms over the years. No return address, but the local postmark would suggest someone with inside knowledge. The next 4 days passed quietly. I maintained my normal routine while anticipating the inevitable explosion. Chris had built his deception carefully over years. It would take Chloe time to process the magnitude of his betrayal. Wednesday evening, my phone shattered the silence with Chris's ringtone. His voice was barely recognizable, raw, desperate, completely broken. You destroyed my family. The words came out as a hoarse whisper. Chloe found everything. She's leaving, taking the baby. My life is over. I simply provided information you chose to hide. She won't listen to explanations. She's staying at her sister's, won't take my calls. You've ruined everything I care about. Background noise suggested chaos. Drawers slamming, papers shuffling, the sounds of a man searching desperately for solutions that didn't exist. Perhaps you should have considered these consequences before threatening to steal my home. I'll do anything. Sign papers giving up all rights to your property. Disappear from your life forever. Whatever you want. Just help me save my marriage. The broken pleading in his voice carried no trace of the arrogant man who'd walked into my home weeks ago. Chris was completely destroyed, exactly as I'd planned. Some consequences can't be undone, Chris. You created this situation through years of deliberate deception. Please, Dad. His voice cracked completely. I know I was wrong about everything. I'll get help, fix the gambling problem, do whatever it takes. But Chloe won't even speak to me anymore. I heard a car door slam in his background, followed by Chris calling Chloe's name desperately. The line went quiet except for his ragged breathing. When he spoke again, his voice carried the hollow tone of complete defeat. She's gone. She just drove away. The silence stretched between us, filled with the wreckage of his choices and the success of my strategy. 2 days later, Chris appeared at my door unannounced. The transformation was startling. Gone was the confident man who'd strutted through my home making demands. This hollow-eyed stranger looked decades older, his clothes wrinkled and his face gaunt with exhaustion. "Dad, please, can I come in?" I stepped aside wordlessly, curious to see what desperation looked like when it had nowhere left to turn. Chris settled heavily into my living room chair, the same seat he'd occupied weeks ago while threatening nursing homes and competency hearings. Now he sat hunched forward, hands clasped desperately between his knees. "Chloe's gone. She took the baby and moved in with her sister. Won't answer my calls, won't see me. The lawyers are saying divorce papers will be filed next week." "I see. Everything's falling apart. The mortgage company wants immediate payment or foreclosure proceedings start. The credit card companies are demanding settlement. I can't," his voice cracked. "I can't handle this alone." I waited patiently for him to reach the point of this visit. "I know I was wrong about the house, about everything. I'll sign papers giving up any future claims to your property. I'll disappear from your life completely if that's what you want. Just help me one more time. Help me save my marriage." "Why would I do that?" Chris looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "Because I'm your son. Because I made mistakes, but I can change. Because without your help, I lose everything. My wife, my child, my future." The irony was remarkable. This was exactly what he'd threatened to do to me. Strip away my home, my dignity, my independence. Now he sat begging for the mercy he'd never shown. "Chris, do you remember what you said when you walked into this house 3 weeks ago?" "I was desperate then. I didn't know what I was saying." "You were quite specific. You told me I didn't need this space, that nursing homes would be more appropriate for someone my age. You threatened legal action to prove my incompetence." "I was wrong. I admit it completely. I was panicked about money and said terrible things. But people can change, Dad. I can change." I studied his face carefully, searching for any trace of genuine remorse rather than calculated desperation. The difference mattered, though the outcome would be the same. "No," I said simply. "What?" "No, I won't help you save your marriage. I won't help you avoid foreclosure. I won't help you anymore. Ever." Chris stared at me in shock. "But I'm your son." "Yes, you are. And for 30 years, you've seen me as nothing more than a convenient source of money. Even now, begging for help, you're not apologizing for trying to steal my home. You're apologizing for getting caught." "That's not true." "It is true, and we both know it." The room fell silent except for Chris's labored breathing. When he spoke again, his voice carried the hollow tone of someone finally understanding the magnitude of his situation. "So that's it? You're going to let me lose everything?" I looked at him steadily. "You already lost everything, Chris. You lost it the moment you decided threats were more persuasive than honesty." He stood up slowly, looking around my beautiful home one final time. At the door, he turned back with desperate eyes. "Please, Dad, I'm begging you." "Goodbye, Chris." I closed the door firmly and turned the deadbolt with a satisfying click. The foreclosure notice arrived 3 days later, addressed to me as former guarantor. Chris had 30 days to vacate the property before sheriff's enforcement would begin. I filed the document carefully in my desk drawer, noting the irony that his threats to steal my home had ended with him losing his own. Harold called that afternoon with additional updates. The divorce papers were served this morning. Chloe's requesting emergency custody and asset protection. Smart woman. She's cutting all financial ties immediately. What about Chris? Radio silence from his end. No legal response, no attempt to contest anything. David Walsh dropped him as a client yesterday. Apparently, Chris couldn't afford the retainer. I drove past Chris's neighborhood on Thursday, not out of cruelty, but simple curiosity about how complete defeat appeared in daylight. A moving truck sat in the driveway while Chloe supervised the removal of furniture and children's belongings. Chris was nowhere visible. The house itself showed signs of deterioration. Newspapers accumulated on the front steps. The lawn hadn't been mowed in weeks, and several windows remained dark even in afternoon sunshine. It looked like what it was, a home abandoned by hope. Friday brought news that Chris's car had been repossessed. The bank had moved aggressively once they discovered his employment income couldn't support any of his obligations without my backing. His transportation, communication, and soon his shelter would be gone. I felt no satisfaction in his suffering, only recognition that consequences were unfolding exactly as they should. For 30 years, I'd shielded Chris from the natural results of his choices. Now, reality was presenting the bill with interest accumulated. Saturday evening, I received a call from Chloe's sister. "Mr. Stewart, this is Jennifer. Chloe asked me to contact you about the children. How are they? Confused but safe. Chloe's staying with us until the divorce finalizes and she finds her own place. She wanted you to know that Chris's problems aren't your responsibility. She understands why you stopped helping. Thank you for calling. She said to tell you that if you ever want to see the baby, you're welcome anytime. What Chris did doesn't change the fact that you're still their grandfather." After hanging up, I sat in my peaceful home, contemplating that unexpected grace. Chloe had lost everything through her husband's deception, yet she offered forgiveness and future relationships with grandchildren I thought I'd never see again. Meanwhile, Chris remained alone in his deteriorating house, counting down days until eviction. No family, no money, no support system, no future he could envision. Everything he'd threatened to do to me had become his own reality instead. The circle was complete. Justice had been served not through cruelty, but through the simple act of refusing to enable destructive behavior any longer. Monday would bring new challenges as Chris faced complete homelessness, but those consequences belonged entirely to him. Now, Tuesday evening brought the sound of breaking glass from my kitchen window. I set down my book calmly and walked toward the noise, unsurprised to find Chris attempting to climb through the shattered opening. "What are you doing?" He froze halfway through the window frame, cuts visible on his hands from the glass. His appearance shocked me, unshaven, clothes torn and filthy, eyes wild with desperation. "I'm coming home, Dad. This is my house, too." "No, it isn't. You're trespassing on private property." Chris completed his entry, dropping heavily onto my kitchen floor and leaving bloody handprints on my counter. "I have rights here. I'm your son. I grew up in this house. You grew up in a rental apartment across town. This house is mine alone. Purchased with my money, titled in my name exclusively. Legal technicalities." He wandered into my living room like he owned it. Family trumps paperwork. You can't just abandon your own child. I followed him calmly, my phone already in hand. "Chris, you have 60 seconds to leave voluntarily before I call police." "Call them. Tell them you're throwing your homeless son into the street. See how that looks." "I'm reporting a break-in by someone who just shattered my window and entered my home without permission." Chris laughed bitterly, settling into my favorite armchair. "I'll tell them you invited me here, my word against yours. Along with the broken window, your bloody handprints, and the fact that I'm calling to report the crime myself." His confidence wavered slightly, but desperation drove him forward. "I'll camp on your lawn then. Tell the neighbors how Larry Stewart abandoned his son during a mental health crisis." I dialed 911 while maintaining eye contact. "1, I need to report a breaking and entering in progress. The intruder is still in my home, refusing to leave. Dad, hang up that phone. 847 Cypress Point Drive, Monterey. Yes, I can see him clearly. He broke my kitchen window to gain entry." Chris stood up frantically. "You're making a huge mistake. I'll tell everyone what kind of father you really are." "The address? Yes, that's correct. No, I don't feel physically threatened, but he's refusing to leave and has already damaged my property." Within 8 minutes, 2 patrol cars arrived with lights flashing. I met the officers at my front door, while Chris remained in my living room, apparently believing his presence there somehow legitimized his position. "Officer Martinez, Monterey PD, you reported a break-in?" "Yes. My adult son shattered my kitchen window and entered without permission. He's refusing to leave despite multiple requests." "Where is he now?" "In my living room, claiming he has rights to live here." Officer Martinez and his partner entered professionally, finding Chris exactly where I'd indicated. "Sir, what's your relationship to the property owner?" "He's my father. This is family business, not police business." "Do you have permission to be on this property?" "I don't need permission. I'm his son." The officer looked at me. "Sir, did you give your son permission to enter your home today?" "No. I explicitly told him to leave, and he refused." "And the broken window?" "He broke it to climb inside after I wouldn't answer the door." Officer Martinez nodded, returning attention to Chris. "Sir, you're under arrest for criminal trespass and property damage." As handcuffs clicked into place, Chris turned to me with pure hatred. "This isn't over." I watched the patrol car disappear into the night, carrying away the last remnant of a relationship that had been destroying us both for 30 years. 1 year later, I sit on my ocean view terrace with morning coffee, watching waves crash against the rocks below. The villa remains exactly as I'd dreamed, peaceful, secure, entirely mine. Birds call from the cypress trees I planted last spring, and the garden thrives under my careful attention. Harold stopped by yesterday with news that made me smile. Chris is working at Pacific Warehouse now. Steady job, small apartment near the harbor. Amazing what people can accomplish when they have to. The irony wasn't lost on me. My son, who'd spent 35 years avoiding real work, had discovered his own capabilities once survival depended on them. No more monthly transfers, no more emergency bailouts, no more excuses. Just the simple equation of work equals shelter, responsibility equals dignity. Jennifer called last month with updates about Chloe and the children. She'd remarried a kind man named Robert who owns a local restaurant. The baby had been born healthy, and they were expecting another child together. Chloe had found the security Chris could never provide, built on honesty instead of hidden debts. "She asked me to tell you that Sunday dinners are open invitation," Jennifer had said. "The children should know their grandfather, especially one with the wisdom to protect them from chaos." That invitation meant more than Chris's threats ever could. Chloe understood that my refusal to enable destruction had ultimately protected her family's future. She'd escaped the financial quicksand that would have consumed them all. My kitchen window, repaired within days of Chris's arrest, sparkles in the morning sunlight. The glass serves as a perfect metaphor. Something broken, made whole again, stronger than before. That break had been necessary, the final severing of an unhealthy bond that masqueraded as love but functioned as exploitation. This morning's mail brought a letter from my investment advisor. My portfolio had grown substantially over the past year without the constant drain of Chris's emergencies. For the first time in decades, my money worked for my future instead of covering someone else's poor choices. Chris had taught me something valuable, though not intentionally. Love that requires self-destruction isn't love at all. It's manipulation wearing compassion's mask. Real love sometimes means saying no, setting boundaries, refusing to enable harmful behavior, even when tears and threats follow. The ocean stretches endlessly before me, painted gold by the rising sun. Seagulls wheel overhead, their cries mixing with the rhythm of waves against stone. This is the peace I'd sought without knowing it. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of self-respect. At 63, I'd finally learned the difference between being needed and being used, between sacrifice and self-destruction, between enabling and love. Chris would either learn similar lessons through his own struggles, or he wouldn't. That choice belonged entirely to him now. The morning grows warmer as I finish my coffee, planning a simple day of reading, gardening, and quiet satisfaction. Tonight, I'll call Jennifer to arrange Sunday dinner with my grandchildren, a future built on healthy foundations rather than manipulation and debt. Sometimes the greatest victory is simply refusing to participate in your own exploitation. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.